Hello and welcome to this week's The Weekly Reel, presented by The Untitled Movie Pod, and I'm your host, Dusty Jones. Right? That's what it says right there. This show is all about me bringing you a review of a movie that's either new, old, whichever. You know, a movie that you probably didn't see because it was either it looked too weird or got really bad reviews because it was weird or just different. I try to spotlight movies that I feel like maybe should have more recognition and more people should see it, and try my best to pick movies that are easily accessible through either Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, or simple VOD. You know, even if it's just a couple of dollars, I'm basically telling you if it's worth that couple of dollars. And yeah, so that's what I do week to week. And this week I am talking about Primer. If you listen to the Untitled Movie Pod, which you probably do or have in the past, if you found this show, this past Sunday or this past week's episode, Dustin brought up this movie, and it's weird that he brought it up because I was already kind of thinking about it last week for some reason. I don't even know why it came into my thought space, but it did. And when I listened over, because unfortunately I couldn't make that show, I was out of town, and then when I heard him say, talk about the movie, I was like, what? So the movie I was going to review this week, once again, as seem to talk about all the time, has some technical issues with it, so that'll be something that we'll have to watch later on. But this week we're talking about Primer. So those of you that heard him say, mention that movie, you're like, what movie is he talking about? This is it. So let's just jump right into the trailer. Alrighty.
You're talking about making a bigger one. You're talking about making a bigger one.
So that was the trailer for Primer. This was one of the first movies I found through Netflix. Dustin said he discovered it and brought it to me. I don't know how, I can't remember that far back, but this is one of those first movies that we found through Netflix that was, even before, nowadays Netflix is so big with, releasing original content or bringing movies that, that don't get mass distribution. Netflix is kind of like that, kind of last straw of, yeah, I may not make a lot of money, but at least I'll get my work out there sort of thing. And this movie was on there in the early days when it came to their streaming. The movie came out in 2004. So let's just look at the deets. Why not? Let's go to the deets. So Netflix currently holds it as a 7. Its synopsis is 4 friends / fledgling entrepreneurs knowing that there's something bigger and more innovative than the different error checking devices they've built wrestle over their new invention. It's directed by Shane Carruth, written by Shane Carruth, stars Shane Carruth, along with David Sullivan, Casey Gooden, Anand Apayaya, Kerry Crawford, and just on and on. But most of these people aren't even barely in the movie at all. I mean, the main two guys is Shane Carruth and David Sullivan. They're your two main stars throughout the film. I read somewhere that this movie was made for $7,000, so a very low budget movie. Definitely didn't, do much of anything at the box office. 28,000 opening weekend in U.S. That's not bad. Overall gross 424. So I mean, this movie made money. I mean that kind of percent yield is better than even some of your big blockbusters, because after you pay for all the advertising and all that kind of stuff, those movies end up needing to make $300 million just to break even. So keep that in mind. It's a pretty short movie at 77 minutes. It's in a 1:85 aspect ratio, and that's pretty much all the details you need to know. I am kind of curious, what has this guy done lately? Not a lot, apparently. Upstream, Color, Everything and Everything and Everything, a bunch of short films. So apparently he's still a struggling small filmmaker, which is kind of a shame based on some of the stuff. But this other dude, he's done some TV, apparently. That's cool. Alright, so we're here not really about the people, but about the movie, right? Primer. Is it good? Should you see it? That's always the big question. Like I said, Netflix, it is available on Netflix, so it's easily accessible. And like I said, it's 77 minutes, so even if it's not your thing, but when I tell you that it's definitely something you should check out, 77 minutes is worth it, I think. This movie is somewhat hard to describe, because the first, I don't know, third or even 2/3 of the movie, you really don't get brought into the fold. I mean, it doesn't like ease you into what's going on. I mean, it literally opens with these four guys in their garage, basically the Silicon Valley version of starting a band in your garage, except you start a small company in your garage and hopefully turn it into something, because these four guys have a kind of a pact between them, and basically for 6 months each guy comes up with an idea. The whole team works on that one idea for 6 months at a time, and if something doesn't come well of it, then they move on to the next guy's idea, and they spend 6 months on it, and so on and so forth. So basically, it feels like you're at kind of the end of one of those cycles, because the guy makes a comment about, I went along with what you guys wanted to do, because everybody's kind of frustrated with what they're working on. They feel like they're not really making any progress. It's not really turning into money, because basically they were trying to turn out patents that'll make money, sort of thing. So the guy makes the comment about, I went along with your ideas even if I didn't believe him or even completely understand what we were doing. I feel like I deserve the same kind of recognition, because what happens is one of the other guys has come along some other idea, and he wants to pursue it pretty much, throw caution to the wind. He wants to do it. And so they basically end up breaking into two teams, to where, two of them work on the one idea and two of them work on the other idea. So our two main guys end up taking over the whole movie. Those other two guys you really don't learn much about. They're just kind of peripheral characters, because it's all about these two guys, their idea, what they're working on, and lots of technical speak happens. They really don't try to explain much to you. Really, you learn by the guy that kind of knows what's going on explain it to the other guy who's trying to figure out the idea. And I question myself whether or not to even tell you, because it may take away from the punch of the film, but it's so non-traditional what we think of when I say the term time machine, because this is definitely a hard sci-fi movie. This is, if this sort of thing could even work, I feel like they've actually thought it through, and it makes sense what they do, and it's very technical. It's not like, let's jump in the DeLorean and go back in time. It's not, sit on the pedestal, pull the wheel, go back in time. Nothing like that at all. I mean, they deal with consequence. They deal with, how to plan your day to make things work. So basically these guys stumble on, because I mean they literally stumble upon the time machine aspect, because when they first build the thing, they don't even know what it does. They just, because they were working with cooling, and can you cool with less electricity, and that was one of their first breakthroughs, is that it kind of self-sustains itself on, that's redundant, sustains itself, and so they start thinking of ways to turn that into a product, to be able to give something cheap, renewable power. But then somewhere along the way, because they work on this idea for a couple months, you hear through some of the voiceover, because there is various voiceovers throughout the film. Some of them are very direct, telling you what's happening, and there's another voiceover that you can kind of barely hear, and if you're not wearing headphones, it can be hard to hear. And it's kind of telling you from an ethical standpoint, sort of what's happening and what's kind of going wrong. So yeah, this movie, as Dustin said on the Untitled Movie Pod, he said that this movie is boring, and I don't remember it being that boring, but yes, this movie can be very boring. This is one of those. This is a movie that exists in this weird limbo of being one of the most boring things you've ever seen, and being one of the most intense, freaking mind-blowing things at the same time. I mean, it occupies the same space. It's so weird, because you're like, I can't look away, but at the same time, it's like, oh, this is so boring as far as the way they go about it, and because sometimes there's not even a lot of dialogue. There's just a lot of cuts and images, and as time goes on, it gets more and more complicated, and you're trying to figure out what's going on here. And I think this movie actually made a list by, I can't remember who, but one of the movies that you have to see twice, at least twice. And that's very true, because once you start doing the time travel thing and the repercussions of that and what it means, a lot of things start permutating, and there's even little kind of visual cues that something else is going on right now, but you're not privy to at the point, because there's a lot of, even though these two dudes are super close friends, basically the power and what it means to be able to do this creates a rift between them, and they both have their own feelings on how to use it, what to do with it, how to control it, and definitely keep other people away from it, because I mean, just somebody because these guys are super by the book, by the numbers. They figure everything out to the last detail, because they don't want to take a chance and like a Butterfly Effect movie, right? Where just everybody dies. I mean, life just gets worse as you're trying to fix it. So yeah, this movie is very interesting. I highly recommend it, but like I said, it is tough to get through. I wish I could tell you a better way to make this movie, but it succeeds, doing what it does, but I just don't know how to make it that, unless you're just, super enthralled with science and technology and consequence and philosophy and all that kind of stuff. It can be very, very dry, very slow. But like I said, at the same time, when the pace of the movie feels like it's dragging, what's actually happening on the screen is so mind-blowing and intense that you can't look away. It's almost like a car wreck, right? Like you don't want to see it, but you want to see it. You know what I mean? Or even a bad smell. as many comedians have talked about in the past. A bad smell that you don't want to smell, but you kind of have to smell, and that kind of weird thing. But that's how this movie is. That's how I can explain it. And I don't want to get too, deep on what's going on in the film. And even telling you time travel is kind of a spoiler, but once you see what's happening, like, you wouldn't even think that's what's going on, really, until later in the movie. And that's why I really was fighting with whether or not to say that. But I think if I tell you that and you start watching a movie, you're like, this is super boring, but you know that there's going to be that kind of element in the movie, it'll keep you going. But like I said, 77 minutes, just push on. It shot, it looks on fairly cheap cameras. Like I said, the movie was made for like $7,000. But it still looks pretty good. There are some really cool shots, like when they're first kind of messing with the machine, and you do that pan over to, because they have a camera watching it to keep all this stuff on record, which we've seen in other movies, but I feel like I've seen it more since this movie, honestly. So I wouldn't say they're the purveyors, they didn't start this kind of idea, but it seems like it happens a lot more since this film. So there are very interesting takes on that, and there's definitely like those little Easter eggs of the time travel thing that you start watching for on the second watch, because like I said, this is definitely a movie you probably want to watch more than once. So I guess instead of being a 77-minute movie, it's what is that? Math, 154 minutes, is that right? I don't know. So instead of an hour or 20-minute movie, it's more like a 2-hour, 40-minute movie, because you really need to see it twice to really get not only to understand it, because I'm gonna be honest with you, the very last like 10-15 minutes of this movie gets very confusing, because they don't try to explain anything to you, which I like, but there is a point where it gets a little like, okay, we may need just a little help, please. A little help. Just a little footnote, something. But the more you watch, the more you kind of get like, what? And I felt that same way with Donnie Darko. That's on that list, I think, too, of movies to see more than once. Unfortunately, with Donnie Darko, I loved it for so long, but then after I've seen it like 20, 30 times, it seems like it falls apart. Like, the first time you say like, oh, what the hell? And then you watch and you start learning more and more and more and more. And then there's a point where it's kind of like the bell curve, right? Where you start to fall off, and you're like, your interest in the movie really starts to fall off after you've seen it so many times. Because some of the logic doesn't work, you know what I mean? That sort of thing. But this movie's really cool. There's hardly any score to it. There's like some lilting piano stuff here and there, especially in the very intense moments. And there goes a fire truck, I'm sure you're hearing. So yeah, check it out, Netflix. There's no reason not to. If you want a movie that's nothing like you're seeing right now, nothing in theaters, if you're bored with that kind of stuff, even though this movie is kind of boring, you won't see anything else like this movie right now. And if you're looking for a head trip, this is it. And if you're looking for some, hard sci-fi or whatever, this is it. So yeah, I recommend it, and check it out. No reason not to. You are forewarned, that is kind of hard to get through, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it. So before I get out of here, let's talk about a few things. Like, if you like this show and our other shows, please head over to www.theUntitledMoviePod.com. There you can check in on our shows, what new shows have come out, and just keep up to date on everything. If you have any film suggestions, if there's a movie I haven't covered or you think I should cover, or even just a comment on what I'm talking about, send us an email at theuntitledmoviepod@gmail.com. If you want to help us out, head over to facebook.com/theUntitledMoviePod, and there, please, like the page. But not only that, share it to your friends. We want more people talking and, conversing about weird movies, and, just have a good community. So please not only share the page, but even share the content, please. And then last but not least, if you want to help us out in a monetary way, you can go over to www.patreon.com/TheUntitledMoviePod. And with a small $5 donation, you can get a shout out on this or other shows. And so yeah, that's pretty much it for this week. I am Dusty, and see you guys next week with some other weird movie, because that's just what I do, right? See you guys next week. Have a good one.